The moment Princess Catherine walked into the room wearing Princess Diana's tiara, Queen Camilla froze. It wasn't just another royal appearance, it was a message. The lover's knot tiara, Diana's most iconic, deeply personal heirloom, now sparkled on the head of the woman the public already calls the new people's princess. And as cameras flashed and whispers spread, one glance at Camilla said everything. Her smile faded, her eyes dropped. She knew what it meant. Diana's memory was alive, and the crown had clearly chosen Catherine. The jewels Camilla wore that night were beautiful, but they didn't carry history. They didn't carry love. The lover's knot did. And the moment Catherine wore it, comparisons to Diana came flooding back. "She looks just like her," someone whispered. Camilla stayed silent, but behind the polished grin, she felt it. The past, the rejection, the shadow that's never really gone. That night wasn't about fashion. It was about legacy, and it left one message hanging in the air. Kate didn't steal the spotlight. It was given to her. The lover's knot tiara has always carried more than just sparkle. It carries history, deep, layered, and heavy with meaning. Commissioned in 1914 by Queen Mary, the tiara was inspired by one worn by her grandmother. She wanted something classic, something that reflected the heart of royalty. And so, a masterpiece of diamonds and dangling pearls was born, crafted not just to dazzle, but to represent endurance, elegance, and the weight of a royal life. It passed through generations, staying in the family, quietly shining on important occasions. But everything changed the day it was placed on the head of a young woman named Lady Diana Spencer. It was a wedding gift in 1981 from Queen Elizabeth II, a silent welcome into the most powerful family in the country. For Diana, it was more than jewelry. It was the start of something beautiful and tragic. Diana wore the tiara often, and the public came to see it as part of her image. It glittered at formal dinners, grand receptions, and royal tours. Every time she appeared with it, the world paused. But behind the elegance was something no one saw. The tiara looked perfect, but it carried pain. For Diana, it became like a shield. She smiled for the cameras, stood tall in rooms full of power, and wore that tiara as if it gave her strength. Some said it held her together. Others said it showed her true self, graceful, proud, and quietly hurting. When Diana died in 1997, the tiara disappeared. No one touched it. No one spoke about it. It was too sacred, too personal. For nearly 2 decades, it remained locked away, wrapped in silence and memory. People whispered about it, wondering if it would ever return. But most believed it never would. That kind of history doesn't pass easily, from one woman to another. And yet, it did. After Diana's tragic death in 1997, the lover's knot tiara was placed into storage. Not discarded, never that, but quietly removed from the public eye, like a memory too tender to revisit. The royal family didn't explain, and they didn't need to. Everyone understood. The tiara wasn't just a beautiful piece anymore. It had become something sacred, something that belonged to Diana alone. Years passed, but her legacy didn't fade. People still spoke her name with warmth. Her story still lingered in newspapers, documentaries, and dinner table conversations. And that tiara, tucked away in the dark, was part of the reason why. It was a piece of her. It had seen her at her most regal and at her most vulnerable. It had shimmered under chandeliers while she held back tears. It had witnessed every quiet triumph and silent heartbreak. For almost 20 years, no one touched it. Other tiaras came and went at royal events, worn by duchesses and visiting queens, but not this one. The lover's knot stayed in its velvet box, untouched and untouchable. It wasn't just jewelry. It was memory. It was loss. And no one dared to wear it because no one could truly carry what it symbolized. People speculated. Would it be passed on? Could anyone ever wear it again without stirring ghosts? Some believed it should remain in a glass case, never to be worn again. Others hoped that someday Someone worthy might bring it back, not to replace Diana, but to honor her. Then came 2015. At a grand diplomatic reception, the kind of royal event where appearances matter and messages are sent without words, Catherine, the Duchess of Cambridge, arrived in a dark evening gown, and on her head, sparkling once more, was the lover's knot tiara. The room froze. The moment was quiet, but powerful. It wasn't just a nod to tradition. It was a resurrection. Diana's memory walked back into the room that night, not in body, but in spirit. Through Catherine's grace, through that familiar tiara, the world saw something it hadn't seen in decades, a connection that time couldn't erase. It wasn't about copying. Catherine didn't try to be Diana, but in that moment, she didn't have to. The tiara did the speaking, and what it said was clear. She's not forgotten. The night Catherine first wore the lover's knot tiara again wasn't planned as a grand statement, but that's exactly what it became. It had been nearly 2 decades since anyone had seen the tiara in public, and when she stepped into the room that evening, heads turned before a word was spoken. The diamonds caught the light, the pearls swayed gently as she moved, and for a moment, time bent. People gasped. Whispers swept through the room like a hush before a storm. "Is that Diana's tiara?" someone murmured. It didn't need an answer. Everyone already knew. The moment was electric, but also emotional. This wasn't a fashion choice. It was a message wrapped in velvet and history, sitting delicately on the head of the woman the world had grown to love, graceful, calm, and quietly powerful. Catherine didn't overplay it. She didn't need to. There were no flashy gestures, no attention-seeking. She simply walked in with quiet confidence, letting the tiara and everything it symbolized do the talking. For many, it felt like Diana had returned, not as a memory of tragedy, but as something brighter, hopeful, almost healing. One guest even whispered, "It's like she's with us again." From that moment on, the tiara was no longer locked in the past. It had found new life, not erased of its pain, but lifted by purpose. And it had chosen Catherine as its new bearer. It didn't erase Diana's legacy, it expanded it. But not everyone in the palace felt the same warmth. Queen Camilla was present that night too. She had her own jewels, her own royal presence, her own place in the monarchy. But she didn't have this. As her eyes settled on Catherine, and that unmistakable piece of history glittered under the chandeliers, something shifted. Her expression didn't break, but something behind it did. Camilla had waited so long to be accepted. She had endured the backlash, the headlines, the comparisons. She had worn other royal tiaras, pieces full of prestige, yes, but none that carried the love and memory of the public like the lover's knot. That one piece had been unreachable. Now it belonged to someone else, and the world had already decided they liked what they saw. The tiara had spoken, and Camilla heard it clearly. Camilla had always known the past would follow her. She'd spent years walking carefully, speaking thoughtfully, trying to reshape a public image that once made headlines for all the wrong reasons. But no amount of poise or patience could prepare her for the night she saw Catherine wearing Diana's tiara again. It wasn't just surprising, it was cutting, a silent reminder that some things, no matter how hard you try, may never truly belong to you. That evening, as Catherine's photos spread across newspapers and social media, Camilla's name was barely mentioned. She had been at the same event, wearing a different tiara, smiling beside her husband. But no one noticed. The cameras, the headlines, the hearts, they were all with Catherine. For Camilla, it felt like history was repeating itself. Again, Diana's image, her memory, was stepping into the spotlight. And again, Camilla was in the background. Only this time, it wasn't Diana herself. It was the woman who now carried her legacy. And the public had already made up its mind. Catherine was their future. The palace remained silent, as it always does. No comments, no explanations. But behind the scenes, insiders say the mood shifted. Camilla, who had worked so hard to earn her crown, now felt it slipping into shadow, not because of scandal or politics, but because of love. The public's love, the one thing you can't buy, can't claim, and can't force. Even among the royal family, the unspoken truth was hard to ignore. Catherine's grace, her loyalty, and the way she wore that tiara had ignited something in the public that Camilla had never quite managed to reach. It wasn't about beauty, it wasn't about rank, it was about connection. For years, Camilla had worn the jewels of the crown. She had stood beside the king, represented the monarchy with diligence and care. But the one piece that mattered most, the one that meant something to the people, was given to someone else, not out of duty, but out of trust. And that trust didn't come overnight. It had been building quietly for years. Through Catherine's steadiness, her silence, her refusal to chase attention. And now, that trust shone in pearls and diamonds, on a tiara that never touched Camilla's hands. In that single moment, Camilla realized something difficult. A title can make you queen, but only love can make you timeless. When Queen Elizabeth II passed away, everything in the monarchy shifted. Not just titles and roles, but meaning. The transfer of her personal jewels became more than tradition. It became a quiet reflection of loyalty, legacy, and unspoken trust. Within palace walls, her vast collection was reviewed piece by piece. Each tiara, brooch, and necklace carried a story, and with her gone, each one had to find a new home. Everyone expected Camilla, now queen consort, to receive the finest pieces. She had earned her place beside the king after all. For years, she had waited patiently, supporting the crown with dignity through whispers and judgment. She had stepped into the role with grace. So naturally, it was assumed the most iconic heirlooms, including the lover's knot, would go to her. But they didn't. Instead, that powerful piece of history was passed to Catherine. No public announcement was made, no royal statement. The tiara simply appeared again, on the Duchess of Cambridge's head, just as Diana once wore it. The world noticed immediately. And so did Camilla. Insiders say the decision came straight from Queen Elizabeth herself. Others believe it was something Charles quietly arranged. But no matter who made the final call, the message was unmistakable. Catherine would carry forward the memory the public cherished. The people's princess had left behind more than just a legacy. She had left behind a symbol, and it would not be placed in the hands of the woman once blamed for her heartache. The transfer was final. In royal tradition, once a tiara is given, it doesn't change hands again. Camilla would never wear it, not once. It was now Catherine's forever. And with it came something more powerful than royal approval. It came with public affection. Camilla still received remarkable jewels. Tiaras that once belonged to the Queen Mother. Pieces rooted in tradition and monarchy. They were stunning, historic, and rare. But they weren't the lover's knot. They weren't Diana's. They didn't move hearts. Catherine, by contrast, didn't just receive one tiara. She was given earrings, brooches, and necklaces once worn by Queen Elizabeth and Princess Margaret. Not because she asked, but because she had been quietly trusted to carry them forward. To many, it wasn't just about jewelry, it was about belief. A belief that Catherine would protect the past while stepping gracefully into the future. And that belief? It was something no crown could command. The palace glowed with golden light, the kind that only comes during a state banquet. Crystal glasses lined the tables, silverware sparkled. The world was watching. It was meant to be a night of royal tradition, dignified, celebratory, and grand. But when Princess Catherine walked in, everything changed. She moved with quiet confidence, her posture graceful, her gaze calm. But no one was looking at her dress or her shoes. Their eyes were fixed on the crown atop her head. The lover's knot tiara had returned, and this time it felt different. The way it caught the light, the way it sat on her head. It didn't just shine, it spoke. Whispers rippled through the room. "She looks just like Diana. Someone murmured, but it wasn't about looks. It was something deeper. Catherine didn't imitate. She embodied. There was strength in her stillness, kindness in her presence. And with that tiara, she wasn't just honoring Diana, she was continuing her story. Then Queen Camilla entered. Her dress was beautiful, her tiara grand. She smiled and greeted guests with the grace expected of a queen. But all eyes had already shifted. The spotlight had moved. Cameras tilted toward Catherine. The internet was already filling with side-by-side photos. Diana in the tiara, Catherine now wearing it. Headlines appeared within minutes. The People's Princess lives on. History in diamonds. Camilla smiled, but the distance was visible. The difference wasn't the jewels, it was the emotion behind them. Catherine's tiara told a story. Camilla's just glittered. For years, Camilla had fought to stand in the light, to earn her place. And now, just when the crown was finally hers, she was watching it slip through her fingers. Not literally, but symbolically. That night wasn't just a royal dinner. It was a moment of transfer, not of titles, but of affection. Catherine didn't ask for the spotlight. She didn't force comparisons to Diana. But when she wore that tiara, she awakened something the royal family hadn't felt in decades: connection. It wasn't about rank. It wasn't about who married whom. It was about who made people feel something. And on that night, as the lover's knot tiara sparkled with memory, Catherine made the world remember what they loved and who they trusted. She didn't take Camilla's crown. She didn't have to. She was already wearing the one that mattered most: the public's heart. After that unforgettable night, when Catherine stepped into the room wearing the lover's knot tiara, something unspoken changed inside the palace and across the nation. The photographs had already flooded every corner of the internet. Her image, radiant and composed, head crowned in diamonds that once belonged to Diana, had struck a chord. It wasn't just admiration, it was remembrance, it was emotion, it was love. To the public, it was a beautiful moment, full of nostalgia and grace. But behind palace walls, the air felt heavier. Silent glances, softened voices, and something deeper beneath the surface. A quiet tension that couldn't be ignored. At the heart of it stood Queen Camilla. She had worked for decades to earn her place. She had kept her head down during the most difficult years, shouldered blame, endured criticism, and remained by Charles's side when it would have been easier to step away. She had watched the world mourn Diana while she kept her feelings to herself. She had accepted that history would always cast a long shadow, but she had also believed, after so many years, that her time would come, that she too would be seen. And then Catherine walked into the spotlight, wearing not just a tiara, but the past. It wasn't an act of malice. It wasn't even intentional. Catherine hadn't asked to become the mirror of a beloved icon. But the moment she wore Diana's heirloom, the world saw her differently, not just as a royal wife or the mother of a future king, but as the living continuation of a story that had never truly ended. Camilla was there that night too, of course. She wore a regal gown and a beautiful tiara of her own, one steeped in its own kind of tradition. But the cameras didn't turn toward her. The headlines didn't feature her. The murmurs in the room didn't follow her path. Instead, they lingered where memory was most alive, with Catherine. For Camilla, it wasn't jealousy. It was something more tender and more painful. A realization. No matter the years of service, the crown on her head, or the dignity with which she carried herself, the public's affection had never really shifted. It had only slept, waiting for someone to awaken it again. And Catherine had done just that, simply by being who she was. In the hours and days that followed, online discourse centered not on protocol or duty, but on feeling. She reminds me of Diana. She's the new people's princess. That tiara doesn't just shine, it speaks. One viral post compared Catherine's appearance to a painting of Diana. not for resemblance, but for what it stirred in people. The same sense of warmth, of grace, of emotional truth. Inside the palace, no words were spoken of these things. There were no confrontations, no breakdowns, only silence. But in that silence, Camilla was left to wrestle with something she hadn't expected. The feeling of being eclipsed, not by disrespect, not even by rivalry, but by history itself. Because that tiara, those diamonds and pearls, that exquisite arc of sentiment, didn't just represent royal jewelry, it represented loyalty, emotion, memory, and in the royal family, those are the forces that shape more than bloodlines. They shape legacies. Camilla had received magnificent jewels from Queen Elizabeth II. She wore the Greville tiara often, a stunning piece of craftsmanship with its own noble past. But it lacked the emotional thread that the lover's knot carried. It was beautiful, yes, but it didn't make people feel. Catherine's jewels, by contrast, were rarely just decorative. Each piece she wore seemed to have meaning stitched into it. Queen Elizabeth's brooches, Princess Margaret's earrings, Diana's ring. She never flaunted them, but she wore them like chapters of a larger story. One that didn't start with her, but that she had been quietly entrusted to continue. And that trust? That silent passing of memory? It was more than any crown could give. Camilla saw this, she felt it, and while she maintained her composure, some part of her understood that the monarchy wasn't just passing down titles anymore. It was passing down hearts. The people had already begun to look toward Catherine not as a future queen-in-waiting, but as the present voice of a memory they still held close. So, as the lover's knot sparkled once again, Camilla stood in the room, smiling for cameras, nodding at dignitaries. But inside, a realization settled deep within her. She had become queen. But Catherine had become something far rarer, a living legacy. As the public buzz around Catherine's tiara moment refused to fade, the royal family remained outwardly calm. Smiles stayed intact. Schedules continued. But the atmosphere had undeniably changed. Not just among fans or the press, but within the palace itself, where history and hierarchy are balanced like fine china. And now the scales were tipping in a way no one could openly discuss. In the monarchy, tradition is everything. It dictates behavior, defines roles, and decides who gets what. Jewels, especially tiaras, are not just symbols of status. They are repositories of legacy. Passed down from monarch to monarch, queen to consort, they carry not just diamonds, but decisions. Decisions about who has earned trust, who will represent the crown next, who belongs. For decades, Queen Camilla had accepted the rules. She never pushed for attention. She wore the tiaras assigned to her, pieces once worn by the Queen Mother, by Queen Elizabeth II. All of them carried history, yes, but none stirred the public's imagination in quite the same way as the lover's knot. That tiara was different. That tiara made people feel. Its sudden reappearance on Catherine's head, without announcement or warning, had sent a ripple through royal watchers and insiders alike. It wasn't just a stylistic choice, it was a signal, one no one had prepared Camilla for. Within royal tradition, that tiara should have been hers. She was the queen consort. She held the second highest rank in the monarchy. After Queen Elizabeth's passing, most assumed the lover's knot, so rich in emotional history, would be reserved for the reigning queen. And yet, here it was, shining on Catherine, evoking Diana, and stirring questions that no press statement could answer. Why Catherine? The public, of course, already knew. Emotion had spoken louder than protocol. In Catherine, they saw the woman who would carry the crown forward not just with ceremony, but with feeling. Her presence wasn't about correcting the past. It was about honoring it. Camilla, for all her perseverance, had never been able to do that. Not because she lacked grace or strength, but because her story had always been tangled in conflict. Diana's legacy, powerful, tragic, beloved, had made it nearly impossible for Camilla to be viewed as anything but the woman who came after. Now, Catherine was being seen as the woman who came next. The contrast between the two couldn't have been clearer. Camilla stood for endurance, tradition, quiet survival. Catherine, on the other hand, had come to represent something softer, more powerful. Grace inherited, trust earned, memory honored. And so, a new kind of divide appeared within the royal family. Not spoken, not formal, but felt. Camilla continued to wear jewels steeped in regal authority. She favored the Greville tiara, worn often by the Queen Mother, and donned necklaces and brooches with deep institutional value. Her image was textbook royalty, structured, deliberate, historical. Catherine's style, meanwhile, was no less regal, but deeply personal. She wore Queen Elizabeth's favorite earrings at small engagements. Diana's sapphire ring never left her finger. And the lover's knot? That became her crown of remembrance. Subtle, powerful, unforgettable. What Camilla wore said, "I belong to tradition." What Catherine wore said, "I remember." The public responded to that difference instantly. People admired Camilla, yes, but they connected with Catherine. They saw their past in her. The mother who changed the monarchy. The princess who made it human. The grace that refused to fade. To some in the royal household, it felt like a shift in power, not of titles, but of emotion. And in the royal world, emotion is influence. Catherine wasn't just popular, she was meaningful. And the tiara had only magnified that truth. Camilla, for her part, didn't complain. She never made her disappointment known, but she didn't need to. The silence was enough. It said she had earned her place, yes, but she had not inherited the story. And in a family where stories last longer than reigns, that made all the difference. The lover's knot tiara had always shimmered with more than diamonds. It shimmered with meaning. It sparkled with memory. And the night Princess Catherine wore it again, it spoke louder than any royal decree. It said, "The legacy lives on." Originally commissioned by Queen Mary in 1914, the tiara was designed to honor her grandmother. It was elegant yet strong, pearls suspended beneath a halo of diamonds, each loop crafted with care. But from its very creation, it wasn't made to simply dazzle. It was made to echo. A symbol of connection, of continuity, of devotion, passed from one woman to the next. Decades later, Queen Elizabeth II passed it down to Lady Diana Spencer. On her wedding day, it wasn't just a gift. It was a welcome, a message that she was now part of something larger than herself. Diana wore it with pride, but also pain. In moments of triumph and sorrow, in palace halls and state banquets, the tiara was there. A constant reminder that behind every smile, there was a story. For Diana, it became her most cherished piece, not because of its value, but because it reflected her perfectly. Beautiful, iconic, weighty, misunderstood. When she died in 1997, the tiara was tucked away, not sold, not reassigned, just put to rest, as though the crown, too, needed time to grieve. For nearly 2 decades, the lover's knot remained untouched. Many whispered it would never be worn again. Too painful, too sacred, too Diana. Then, in 2015, quietly and without fanfare, it appeared again. This time on Catherine's head. The world stopped. It was the same tiara, the same silhouette, but it didn't feel like history repeating. It felt like history continuing. It was a powerful choice, one that carried weight far beyond fashion. Catherine wore it not to claim Diana's place, but to honor it. Her presence didn't erase the past. It illuminated it. Every time she's worn it since, that message has only grown louder. Catherine never boasts, she never demands attention. But somehow, when she steps into a room with that tiara on her head, the entire space shifts. People fall silent. Cameras flash, and the world remembers. Because it's not just Catherine they're looking at. It's Diana. It's Queen Mary. It's Queen Elizabeth. It's the lineage of women whose strength and softness shaped a monarchy. And it's the feeling that the crown doesn't belong to a single head, but to a shared story. For Camilla, that message was quietly devastating. She had received many other jewels from the late queen. Brooches, necklaces, earrings that spoke of tradition and honor. But none of them held the heart of the public. None of them carried the emotional signature that the lover's knot did. The tiara had bypassed her entirely. Some said it was Queen Elizabeth's decision, made long before her passing. Others believe it was Prince William's quiet wish. Still others whisper that it had always been meant for Catherine. Regardless of how it happened, the result was the same. Camilla would never wear the tiara, not even once. And that mattered, because in the royal world, heirlooms don't just sparkle. They speak. They choose. Camilla had earned her title through patience and loyalty. She had stood beside King Charles when no one else would. She had redefined what it meant to be queen consort. But she would always be seen as part of a different story, one built on rebuilding, not remembrance. Catherine, meanwhile, wore her story lightly, but with power. Each time she appeared in the lover's knot, it wasn't about being royal, it was about being real. She didn't try to fill Diana's shoes, she simply walked beside the memory. And the public noticed. In their hearts, Catherine wasn't just part of the monarchy, she was part of its soul. In time, Camilla would continue to attend royal events. She would wear her own jewels, her own tiaras, and smile politely through the flash of cameras. But the sparkle would never carry the same emotional pull. The crown had chosen. The people had chosen. And whether anyone said it aloud or not, the tiara had made it clear. Catherine wasn't wearing the future. She was wearing the story. And in the monarchy, no story matters more.